Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look, of course, at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Sodha, and the Home Affairs editor at The Times, Matt Dathan. Lovely to see you both. As ever, to the front pages we head right away, including The Guardian. Their headline, Beyond Comprehension, says The Guardian, as it reports Libya's flooding leaves thousands dead. 10,000 lost in tsunami dam burst. That is the headline for the front page of the Metro. The Eye is reporting that the state pension triple lock is under threat following the election. The Daily Mail is leading with a similar story. Its front page reads, Minister's threat to the future of the pensions triple lock. While the Express says, don't make sneaky changes to the pensions triple lock. The front page of the Financial Times has a warning from Sir Tony Blair to the opposition leader. Labour cannot tax and spend its way out of a Tory mess. The Telegraph is also leading with a warning from a prominent political figure, the former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, claiming that human rights laws protecting terrorists. Year of the Shoplifter, says the Mirror, reporting an increase in the crime. And the Daily Star claims to have the secret to success: never give more than 85% effort, according to experts. 100% effort here tonight, obviously. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us, our guests indeed. So Sonia Sodha and Matt Dathan here. Welcome to both of you. Two main stories, I guess, Libya and the pensions triple lock. We'll come on to that. But let's start, Matt, with Libya. The Guardian, one of the papers with those devastating pictures that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's right. And the aid organisations, quoted in The Guardian, describe it as disastrous beyond comprehension. 10,000 people reported missing, 1,300 already declared dead. It's absolutely devastating. And it just shows you, I guess, how a failure in government over the last 12 years since Gaddafi was overthrown and killed has caused this country to complete failure to deal with this emergency situation, weak infrastructure, low-lying areas susceptible to flooding. So when this torrent of rainfall came, this city on the northern coast, Derna, was completely indefensible. It's a really horrible situation there, and it's only going to get worse.
Just hearing an update, actually, on the numbers of dead. The death toll in Derna alone has now exceeded 5,300. This is according to the state-run news agency, quoting Mohammed Abu Lamusha, a spokesman for the East Libya Interior Ministry. As you said, nation split, east and west, 5,300. That's so far, obviously. People in Libya are struggling to even get there. You know, it's utterly devastating. And it seems to be a dam high up in the mountains, a dam nearer the town, a wadi that ran through, seasonal, should have been empty at this time of year. And this tsunami effect came through, which is, you know, how the other newspapers, the Metro, is reporting it.
Absolutely. I mean, those numbers are just terrible, 5,300 so far.
Just in Derna as well.
Just in Derna. And I think experts are expecting that death count to go up to possibly 10,000 is a figure. And I mean, those are the sorts of figures that you hear in relation to the very worst kind of earthquakes, like really terrible natural disasters. And as you said, Anna, it sounds like what's happened here is that two dams have burst, creating this, you know, very, very terrible flooding. It has just kind of swept through the town, areas where people live, residential areas, causing terrible, terrible damage. And I think, you know, as Matt's kind of hinted at there, this is a country where there are serious infrastructure issues around maintenance of infrastructure, etc. We don't know exactly what it is about these dams, you know, whether it was just the sort of natural phenomenon or whether there were sort of certain structural weaknesses that made them particularly vulnerable. I'm sure that is all stuff that is going to come out in the coming days. But I think tonight you've just got to think it's really hard to get your head around the scale, I think, of this devastation. Obviously, there's a huge loss of life, but there's going to be many, many more thousands of people who've been displaced, who, you know, will have gone missing. And the fact that it's so difficult for aid to get in, international aid from the rest of Libya, I think it's genuinely a really terrible situation.
Absolutely, yeah. 2 dams burst, 4 bridges collapsed as well. More detail will no doubt come out. But actually, climate change activists would have said, we warned you. You know, the warmer conditions lead to greater levels of rainfall. We saw it in Greece as well, didn't we? North of Volos and Skiathos, the same storm causing utter devastation there as well. And actually, the predictions are that more of the world will see devastation like this. And now it's time for adaptation, mitigation, to try and work out how to, stem rainfall like this across the globe.
Yeah, but you can have all the warnings you like, but if you have a complete failure in government, the country completely divided by 2 factions. I mean, there's one journalist, a local journalist in Libya, described it, I think, in The Guardian, as everything in the last 12 years was about war. And the two factions have really slowed down the government in all other areas. All they care about is trying to seize power.
I mean, look at the people in this shot, trying to pick their way through. What are they looking for? Who are they trying to find? Family members, a car driving there, and the bottom right of your screen there. And this is now a cliff face that's literally collapsed, hasn't it? And this wadi, as I said, which was seasonal, now has broadened. It's taken down, high-rise buildings in some areas. There's the Mediterranean Sea in the distance, which has almost changed colour by the force of the mud washing down. Absolutely extraordinary scenes there. And, this is just the start, isn't it? It's hard to access. More detail will come. Communication has been down. Power is out, not surprisingly, from what we see there. But, in the coming days, no doubt we'll hear much more.
Absolutely. And when you look at pictures of that sort of scale of devastation, it's obviously about the aid in the here and now. And that's when we hear a lot about it on the international news. But in the years to come as well, and, people were saying this in the wake of, you talked about the Greek fires, these things take communities years and years to rebuild from. And, I'm sure that's something that we're going to be seeing in Libya as well, which is a country that has been devastated by civil strife and war. And, where are the resources going to come from to rebuild a city like this? It's really not clear.
Yeah, the FT has it on the front too, cars piled up just right by the sea. It just shows this is a low-lying area. And, this is already the devastation washed down. At this point, they said 1,000 bodies have been recovered. Now we know 5,300 are confirmed dead, and burials will be happening very quickly, which is the norm, isn't it? So we'll, utterly devastating. And indeed for family members here. Awaiting news of people. Let's move on to the state pension triple lock then, shall we? The Eye suggesting it is under threat after the election. Is it just after the election, Sonia?
Well, no, there's actually talk whether there may be an adjustment now. So the triple lock is a pledge that was made by the coalition government, around a decade ago, which is essentially pensions will go up either by earnings or inflation or by 2.5%, whatever is higher. So pensioners will always get the best deal out of the 3. Now, the issue at the moment is that earnings data is very high. So it's around kind of 8.5, 8.6% is the forecast of what it's going to be. And that is going to be the highest out of all of those 3s. Inflation data is going to be around 7%. And one of the reasons why it's a bit higher than you might expect, well, partly it's because wages have been very flat and they've been a bit more buoyant lately, but also it's done on data in the 3 months, I think, to the end of July. But importantly, that data will include the public sector kind of one-off boosts that the Chancellor has paid as part of settlement with various groups of public sector workers. So that's one reason why they're high. So there is talk at the moment whether the Chancellor might try and save a bit of money by just sort of, taking out that bonus, that public sector one-off bonus to workers and sort of deflating the earnings figures a bit. Now, the thing is that actually wouldn't save that much money in the grand scheme of things. And, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister would take a hit as a result of doing that. So I'm not actually... So there's clearly people floating this idea politically, perhaps kind of lowering expectations for people who are in receipt of the state pension. There's a lot of talk about the long-term implications of that triple lock, how much we're going to be spending on pensions by 2050. But I would be surprised if we see it, because the relative savings would be quite small. I'd be surprised if the government went there.
Don't depress me that inflation's going to go on a lot longer if you start talking about 2050. But this is the debate currently underway. Is it politically suicidal to ditch it in any form, or is it unsustainable as it is? And, what did you pick?
Well, it's quite clear before the election neither political party is going to ditch the triple lock commitment. It would be
Labour too,
suicidal.
keeping it?
Well, they've urged the government to keep it this year, but Angela Rayner this morning was very clear that she's not committing, just like every other spending commitment by the Labour Party, not committing to anything after the election. What is interesting in the article online, which is alluded to in the splash here, is that they point to William Hague's comments in the Times this morning, where he says it's ultimately unsustainable in the long term. Comments that were echoed by Mel Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, at lunchtime today. And people in government are saying, look, William Hague is a close ally of Rishi Sunak. Sunak replaced him as Richmond MP in North Yorkshire. That is a sign that Rishi Sunak is basically going to follow if he wins the next election. But in the short term, I think it'd be electorally suicidal for either party to ditch that.
And part of the debate is how you view pensioners in this country and about the generational imbalance that some people see here. Are they the most protected sector of society, or are they people who have no means of bolstering their income through work and therefore need all the help they can get? Yeah,
and I think there's a bit of truth in both, right? So I think that if you look at who pensioners are and who makes them up, it's true. There's some very affluent people in there who kind of own their own house, perhaps other properties, they've paid off their mortgage. Some of them will have very, very healthy final salary pension schemes that people in their 20s and 30s will absolutely not get a look into at the moment. So there's some very affluent people in that age group. There's also some people who are, essentially living in pensioner poverty, and increases in the state pension have really benefited them over the last kind of 20 years or so. So personally, I think if you take it, there's no question there are real issues of intergenerational unfairness in this country. If you look in the housing market, the fact that so many people in their 20s and 30s today will never, ever be able to afford their own house. They will always be renting, and then they will retire, and suddenly they'll have to fund private sector rent out of their retirement income. We haven't even got our heads around that. The fact that young people in their 20s will just be entitled to nothing like the level of pension entitlement that, people who've worked all their lives in their 70s and 80s have today, and, the ones who've had good middle-class jobs. But I think the answers don't lie actually in the state pension versus working age benefits. It's about really sorting out the housing market, for example, and thinking about our system of higher education funding. So I think that's where the big wins come for young people, rather than chipping off bits of the state pension and trying to save money that way.
And there's The Guardian picking up on what you said about the government insiders believe they could justify tweaking the way they calculate the annual increase as a one-off, because otherwise pensions would continue to rise far more quickly than wages, saving £1 billion. Now, are we into trimming like that? Is this what they're about now? Trying to trim bits, across it? We've got spending reviews coming up, King's speeches, haven't we? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, we got used to those huge figures during the pandemic. Yeah. 600 million to a billion doesn't really feel like that much, but it is going to be vital, I think, coming to fixing the finances after the election. But what is interesting is that Labour are really not committing to keeping it after the election, because they just are trying to be as disciplined as possible when it comes to any kind of spending commitment. I guess just like Gordon Brown was when New Labour won in '97.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, actually, it really puts it into context. When you say £1 billion, chancellors do not take big political hits for sums of £1 billion.
OK.
If they're going to take a big political hit, they've got to be saving more money than that.
It does seem logical to take off the one-off payments, the bonus payments to staff, though, doesn't it? That feels, that feels doable politically.
It's quite ironic that is backfired on the Chancellor. He did that to try and end the strikes, but now that's coming back to haunt him in a way.
And they have done similar adjustments before, so it's not the first time. So in the wake of the pandemic, as we came out of the lockdowns and there was that very kind of strong earnings growth in the wake of that, they did adjust down somewhat. So it wouldn't be the first time they did it. I just think the closer you get to an election, the less likely they are to take
public
decisions
understood you couldn't give 20%
that upset the age group that are most likely to come out and vote.